it looks like we don't have anyone left waiting in the chat, so I am going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. My name is Ashlyn, and I'm the Assistant Director of Volunteer Management here at Grand Valley State Alumni Relations Office. If you haven't done so already, please introduce yourself in the chat. You can share your name, grad year, and why this session was of interest to you. This afternoon's workshop is the final installation of our Career Readiness series. With the support of fellow GVSU alums, we are able to offer you in-depth career support that is catered towards recent grads and Grand Valley alumni searching for a postgraduate career. Before I hand it over to our panelists for introductions, I would like to share a brief outline of today's program. So far in the Career Readiness series, you may have joined us for sessions on taming imposter syndrome, organizing your job search, and crafting a winning resume. This afternoon, Boomy Parks and Jamie Belt are joining us as panelists. They will introduce themselves and share a brief career history. Additionally, they'll talk about evaluating the job offers from their diverse perspectives. They are here to share advice about how to determine salary requirements and or negotiate a salary offer, to navigate the timing of receiving an offer while still interviewing, and to share additional insights on other job offer hot topics. After they have each had the opportunity to share, I will begin to facilitate questions. This is not an incredibly formalized event, but rather an opportunity for you to ask questions that are most important to you during the job search process. I have a list of popular questions that I will be asking. Additionally, please feel free to ask your own questions by using the chat or hand raise functions or unmuting yourself. And with that, I will hand it over to our panelists. Jamie, would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure thing. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having us here today. My name is Jamie Belt. I currently work with Kellogg Company. Just a little bit of my background. I started interning. My first internship was actually in talent acquisition. So I've been doing the recruiting and the behind the scenes work for a little bit. And then post-graduation, I worked as a recruiter at Spartan Nash Company for a few years. I did high volume recruiting, so in manufacturing and distribution centers, all the way up to director level on the corporate side. And then recently moved to Kellogg. Well, not recently anymore, almost 2 years at Kellogg. And I support our apprenticeship program, which is early in career individuals like yourself, just in the skilled trades. So love talking about offers, interviewing, all of that good stuff. I love questions. Please ask them. Like she said, I don't want to talk at you guys. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are and questions are. And Boomy and I have done this before together, and we agreed, like, it's just nice to be able to help educate people on the recruiter side of the function so that you guys are that much more prepared. So I'll hand it off to Boomy to introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Jamie. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. My name is Boomy Parks, and I am a 2008 and 2013 graduate of Grand Valley. I did the public and nonprofit administration programs with an emphasis in HR. So just a quick background about me. I got my start in HR working for the university, actually. So my work study position was working at Grand Valley in the Human Resources Office. When I started that job, I had just switched my major from engineering to public and nonprofit administration. So went through this self-discovery and fell in love with HR because I was doing some really cool work at the institution. And then my career took me lots of places. So I'm one of those people who has changed jobs a few times in my career. Started out working at the university, then switched to working at Cascade Engineering, and then switched to working for the city of Grand Rapids, and then moved across the state and took a break to raise a little one, and then started working for a chemicals manufacturing organization, McDermott, or Element Solutions, Inc. They went through a name change while I was there. Then got a director role at a small nonprofit, the Detroit Justice Center. And now I'm serving as Vice President of Talent and Culture for the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. So this is a process that's near and dear to my heart. I've done it several times personally, and then I do it all the time in my day-to-day, navigating my day-to-day job. So excited to be here and get into all of your questions.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you both again for being here. So I've broken down the questions or prompts that I have tonight into, or this afternoon, I should say, into a couple of different categories. The first being questions around the interview process. So I will go ahead and jump right in. And then again, participants, if anyone has any feedback or questions or wants to continue the conversation a bit, please feel free to do so. So starting off here, what are some standout interview techniques that you have noticed in your own positions? What's one thing an interviewer has done that has really stood out to you?
I can start with just one quick example, and it's kind of a broad example. But I would say anyone who comes to an interview with, I would say, like perfectly timed examples of the types of question you're asking them. It's really difficult when someone asks you tell me about a time when you had to deal with conflict, like a really broad open-ended question. It's really difficult, and it takes a lot of forethought to think through how to explain a situation without going too far into detail and taking a long time, but still providing enough specifics. I can tell you one of the number one pieces of feedback I give candidates is that they were too broad, that they just said, oh, I had to deal with, conflict one time on a team and we figured it out. Well, I didn't really learn anything about how you did that. So I would just say candidates who have clearly put in the time and effort to think of examples from their work scenarios and know how to explain it thoroughly, but without talking for 20 minutes straight.
I'd add on to that, really, I totally agree. I think that honestly, candidates that are prepared, that show that they've prepared, and a way to show that is to rehearse and kind of go through some of the examples that you could be asked, knowing that most of the questions are going to be behavioral based, meaning not closed-ended, so it's not requiring a 1 or 2 word answer. Most times interviewers are going to be asking you to tell me about a time when. And so the folks who have prepared for that have stood out the most to me. I also like it or have appreciated when folks seem to just be paying attention to the social cues or the conversation. Like when the interview, the structured interview feels less like an interview and more like a conversation from beginning to end, that has really stood out.
Thank you. Sorry, I was reading your comment, Jamie. Thank you for adding to the chat as well. So conversely to that, Jamie, you touched on it a little bit, but maybe we can expand a little more. What are some pet peeves that candidates do in the interview process? Things to avoid?
I will say having candidates that come in maybe just a little too confident, like that they don't wait for like interview questions, they just start talking, and some of that's nervousness, and people will identify that if it's just nervousness. I see it particularly in like the sales function, that sometimes like people come in and they've prepared like a whole deck or like a presentation, and that's not even a part of the interview process. So I would say, let your interviewer kind of take the lead. And I'd also say just not having availability. This is actually a really good one now that I think about it, working with students. When I was doing internship recruiting, I used to really struggle with like a student we'd want to interview them for a final round, and they'd say like, oh, well, I have finals, so I don't think I can make it in at any time this week. Or, you have everyone has tons of conflicting priorities. So I would say just not really making the time to interview when we have like a quick timeline we're trying to work on to stay respectful to all other candidates and the hiring team. Do your best to make yourself available, because it pains me if you're like our number one candidate, but you're saying you can't interview for another 3 weeks. Our hands are a little bit tied, like we have to move forward. So those are mine.
I'd say mine are, lack of preparation. So that comes through. I think interviewers expect you to be nervous. They do not appreciate or expect you to become unprepared. So, you can probably, talk through all of the nerves with just some preparation, right? It's showing that preparation on our end. And then there was one more thought that I forgot. Excuse me. Yep, it's the end of the day, so it'll come back to me.
You just let us know when it comes back, no
Yep.
problem. So when in the interview process, how upfront should a candidate be about if they're in the interview process with other companies, and how would you handle that conversation?
Yep, thank you for asking that, because that was the second thing. It was when candidates aren't upfront and aren't explicit about where they are or their interests, because kind of piggybacking off of what Jamie said, if you are our top candidate and, for example, you don't have availability or you're a lead candidate in another recruitment, that's important for us to know, because for the top candidate, we may rearrange the whole timeline to get you in the door faster and get you on the people's calendars that we need to get you on so that you can be interviewed. So really, if you are being, so here's the thing, right? You don't lead with that. At the beginning of the interview, you don't say, hi, my name is Boomy, and by the way, I'm wanted by 3 other organizations, right? But at a point that it seems natural, either towards the end of the interview or in your follow-up email to them, I'd say those are the perfect times to indicate that.
And it looks like Jamie stepped out for a minute, so I'm just gonna keep on chatting with you, Boomy.
Sounds good.
And Danny, I'm gonna call you out. If you want to pipe into any of this, please feel free to offer any of your expertise or advice. Danny is our alumni career coordinator with the Career Center. So we are lucky enough to have her join us. So in the interview process, would you say what would you say is an appropriate way to ask how the position pays during the interview, or is there ever an appropriate way to do that?
That's a good question. And I feel like it was a really big deal. It was really tricky to navigate several years ago when pay transparency was not as common. Now I feel like, many organizations are moving towards pay transparency. That's the first thing. And also tools to help compare salaries are more at a job seeker's fingertips. They're at a job seeker's fingertips now more than ever. So what I mean by that is there are so many sources of information to get pay details. And so a couple of industries may require some steps, but just know that many of them don't require any steps. So for example, roles that are in public government or at other institutions are public. It's public information, information that everyone has to have access to. So know that if you're, looking for a job in one of those industries, like in public or many nonprofits, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be posted. But let's say you're interviewing for a role and it's not at one of those types of organizations that typically publishes the salary, and it's not really clear where this position is placed. There's a couple of things you can do. Some employers will ask your salary expectations up front. And so you can use that as an opportunity to reciprocate that request of the organization with an ask about the range if it's not already published. So you could do that. Or you can find time either at the end of the interview or in your follow-up to understand what the range is. But I'll speak, not that I speak for all HR practitioners, but I'll speak for a few. Some HR practitioners, not me, but some may be rubbed the wrong way by an ask during the interview. So you just really kind of have to, do some research, right? If you know anyone in the organization or can network, that can also be an avenue for trying to understand where the range is. But yeah, you can do the research up front or in your follow-up to the recruiter, say, I want to confirm that this range or the range for the role is within, one that I can accept. And then also, yeah, I would say be upfront too about that too. Like if the range is outside of something that you're able to accept, just know and understand that and be upfront.
And so if, how should I phrase this? If you're asked what your developed or desired salary is, would you say it's appropriate to give a range rather than a number?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to give a range if you're asked. And also I think, but I'll have a caveat for that, right? If you're in the final stages of an interview, I think it's very appropriate to give a number if you have that number. I don't think you should shy away from that. I think it's about it's all a part of you ascertaining for yourself, whether it's through budgeting or understanding, getting advice from mentors or other people in your lives. Understanding what that bottom line number is for you is very important. And, so the range is important, but also when it's time, when you're considering an offer, it's okay to get very specific about that and realize that the number consists of a base salary, but also some other things too. So, really just understand everything that is involved in that number, whether it's the base salary or your total compensation.
And when you say total compensation, you mean benefits, right?
Yep.
Okay, just making sure. So I'm going to move down a little bit to our next section of questions, which is all about evaluating the offer. So you've gone through your interview process, you've gotten an offer. What type of salary should you expect, and what resources are there to determine what an appropriate salary range is for your position? Do you know any places where you can find salary data?
Yeah. Okay. So salary data, you can go to payscale.com, salary.com. Google is a good source of that information. Glassdoor, Idealist, you can typically find pay data online pretty easily, more easily now, I feel like, than ever. And LinkedIn often publishes it, and they'll verify the source. They'll say, like, is this reported from the employer, or are they guesstimating? So lots of places to find salary data. I know this was a 3-part question, so remind me, Ashlyn, of the other 2 parts.
Just how you can evaluate what type of salary you should expect.
Yep.
You touched a little bit on the resources
Yep.
that are available to determine salary range for your position and where you can find data already. So
this is such a good question. So when you are evaluating what is a good salary for an offer, there's a few things that you want to know and be cued into. First and foremost, most organizations use a compensation philosophy to help determine to help set some parameters and expectations around their pay. For example, many of the employers that I've worked for have said, hey, our compensation philosophy is such that we want to pay people full market value for the roles, right? So what that means is compensation consultants crunch a bunch of numbers to understand, hey, what's a fair wage for an accountant? What's a fair wage for an engineer? And it's really based on aggregate data. So they're pulling together information and figuring out, okay, here, this seems to be a fair number for full market value. And I'll get to explaining what full market value means, but some people call it the midpoint or the middle of the range. And so employers will say, hey, if we want to attract the best, brightest folks, we always want to make sure we're paying full market value. We want to pay midpoint. So that detail of where an employer wants to be is very important, because that helps you then as a candidate know, well, how much can I expect to be paid, right? So some organizations like government institutions, a lot of public organizations have a bargaining unit. So they have a labor contract that dictates where you can qualify into the salary range. But other organizations may not have that step increase, and they use the compensation philosophy to help determine that. And so usually organizations that I'm familiar with have said, all right, well, if we are going to pay at the midpoint of a range, so in the middle of the range, what that means is that person is fully competent in the role. So they've come in and they don't need training, they don't need support, they know the job, have done the job before. So if you are evaluating a job offer as an entry-level professional, then you may expect to be paid somewhere between the minimum and the midpoint of a range, right? And so if you want to qualify for higher than the midpoint, or the midpoint and higher, closer to the max, you then have to understand what the compensable factors are at that organization to qualify you to jump ahead. So sometimes there are folks are limited based on where other people are being paid, right? There's an equity question that they have to consider, or sometimes the budget may restrict where they can place a role. But when you're evaluating, the key things are know what the compensation philosophy is, and really understand how they are using that compensation philosophy, if they have one, to place new hires or people who are new at the organization.
Thank you so much, Boomi. And Jamie, I know you just hopped on in the middle of that question. So we were looking at, you went through the interview process, you received an offer, and what are your steps to evaluating that offer and determining what type of salary you can expect or should expect?
Yeah, great. And thanks for picking up my slack for a second, Boomi. So I would say, I'm sure Boomi talked about, I know what you just talked about, and I agree with all of that. But I would say it's all about how you've approached the interview process up until then as well. Like making sure that you were candid and clear about your expectations during the interview process. And there's so many great tools out there now that kind of give you comparison of what is, like she said, the market range basically for the role. So you've got Glassdoor, and Indeed even has a lot of it, LinkedIn. You have a lot of great resources that show you what the possibilities are. I would say just always keep in mind where you're at. Don't look at a salary in California. I think that's what you're going to get in Michigan necessarily. And like I said, be candid with your recruiter from the very beginning of what your expectations look like. My advice to like my friends and family when they ask me about this is, if you have set a range and they've met you within that range, then I would be satisfied, I suppose, but if they have come in below that, then I think you have absolutely every right to maybe go back and ask for more, but that might be a separate question. So I'll pause there.
I'm writing down a future question, so thank you. So with that, as business professionals, seasoned business professionals, do you have any basic budgeting tips or advice when folks are evaluating the type of offer that could be appropriate for them or their lifestyle?
What comes to mind is a reflection on a time in my life when I was seeking a job for experience. So I was in a position and I was an early career professional. So it was probably my, second or third year out of college. And I knew that I needed more experience. And so for me, to answer that question really requires knowledge about two things, right? So you've got to know your personal finance situation, right? But you also have to be able to answer the question of what is your why? And so for me at that point in time, I knew I needed more experience, and to get that experience, I needed to take a pay cut. So that was a decision that I had to make, but not without a clear understanding of, how I was going to make up the difference. So I took that pay cut, and it wasn't taking a pay cut for the sake of taking a pay cut. It was taking a pay cut so that I can get the experience I knew I needed to get me to the next level. So in the meantime, I got a second job. I used to work at Yonkers in Grand Rapids at Rivertown Mall. And that was, something that I did during a season in my life, after talking with the folks who loved me and supported me, right? And making sure that that was something that I could do, right? Work a full-time job and a part-time job to make up that delta, handle and pay my bills, but also get me further in my career. So, and I will just say, my partner is a finance person. So it's not my area of expertise. I'll just put that out there, right? I like to talk to people and project manage in a workplace, don't like numbers. That's why I switched from engineering to human resources. So yeah, maybe Jamie, you've got some actual budgeting advice.
No, I mean, I echo your thoughts. And this is where I say it's important for you to be upfront about what your expectations are. I have literally said, I can't tell you how many countless times to candidates that turn me down when we talk about money in that first conversation. Look, it's your lifestyle. Like, I'm not going to tell you to compromise your lifestyle for this job. It's all about what you're willing and what you're looking for. I would say a budget is only good as your discipline. Like, that's one thing. So I'm a big budget person. I am a nerd about it. I love going into my personal budget every month and looking at how I did. But that's the number one thing that I think sometimes people miss the mark, as simple or as silly as that seems, that you can make a budget all day long, but if you don't follow it or you don't, stick to what the restrictions are on it, you're not going to have much luck. So I would say, a lot of people are facing student loan challenges, obviously coming out of four-year universities at this point. Build that into your budget. That's a huge one that it will creep up on you very quickly. So I always kind of recommend start there and then figure out where the rest of your budgeting lies. And there's a ton of great resources. Same thing. We're so lucky to be in the day and age where there's Every Dollar. That's an app that I've used previously. You have Excel if you want to do it the more manual way. There's tons of seminars on it, I'm sure, that you can participate in, tons of books on it. So start small. I mean, even if it's just saying I'm going to save X amount of dollars each month and you don't track the rest of it, I'd start there. And then if you want to get more granular, if you have a goal of buying a home, if you have a goal of paying off all your student loan debt, figure out where your goals lie and then work towards that. But I always say a great first step is just identify how much money you want to save. How much money do you want to put away every month, and then hold yourself at least to that.
One more thing that I would like to add too is that lots of employers are, they have financial education support services. So, it's a part of becoming or being an employer of choice. So to that point, don't feel like you have to know all the answers, have all the answers, or have it all figured out all at the same time. Definitely use the resources you have at the ready, but also know that many employers offer this as a resource for their folks.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I am going to move down to the negotiation process and ask some questions around that a little bit more. So when you receive an offer, what is the best way to handle the negotiation conversation? So starting off, how do you handle a negotiation for a salary if they come back and say the salary offer is firm and or they cannot deviate?
Yeah, that's I think a great question. Again, my hope is always going to be that we've gotten to a point in recruiting best practices that what the range is ahead of your offer. So I'll start off with, and Boomy kind of touched on this earlier, if you are not aligned to the money that they say is associated with this role, and that in the first interview, do not keep going in hopes that that number is magically going to change somewhere in the process. I think she did a great job of explaining those are set. It's not something that's as, fluid, I guess, as some people like to perceive it to be. There's usually a little bit of wiggle room. And that's why I always give my candidates about a 10 to 15K range, maybe. But just know that if the number is nowhere near your expectation, it will not magically change to be closer to, if you're that far off. So I'll start there. If someone says that it's a firm offer, I would say, I always tell people to think about it, right? Like I would not try to negotiate right in that moment. I just expressed some gratitude for the offer. So excited about this. I really enjoyed the interview process, getting to know the team and the role. I'd ask how much time you have before you can make the decision on the offer. It's again a good transparent thing to say, I just want to think about this and review with my loved ones and affected partners, and I'll get back to you by X date that you agree on. And then if you ultimately decide that if it's a firm offer and it's just not what you want, you can't accept it, then I think you go back and you can put the ball back in the employer's court and just say, again, so grateful for this offer and the opportunity. Unfortunately, I was hoping to be closer to X range. So if the offer is firm, I will have to respectfully decline. If there is opportunity to discuss further or to look at other alternative forms of compensation that could be addressed, I'd love to revisit that. And I'll let Boomi probably elaborate on like the other stuff you can negotiate if the offer's firm, but those are my, I guess, starting steps.
Yeah, thanks for the alley-oop, Jamie. I think definitely if you can't negotiate salary or base pay, see if you can negotiate vacation time or a signing bonus, a relocation bonus, a retention bonus after a certain amount of time. All of the benefits that are counted in total comp, see if there's some wiggle room there. If there isn't, then understand that, right? Understand that there may not be room, and then you have to understand for yourself if it's still something you want to accept. And I think, again, this gets back to your why. So if an organization isn't able to meet your salary expectation, I'm not suggesting to, job hop per se, but I am saying to understand, the purpose that role can serve in your career journey for the amount of time it can serve it. And that's okay, right? If it can't pay you, everything, but it is a way for you to learn critical skills that you otherwise wouldn't be able to learn, then consider that too. So there are some very tangible things beyond base pay that you can negotiate. And then if there isn't anything to negotiate, but you feel your heart is still drawn to the role for a reason, understand that too and weigh that against those tangible options.
Thank you. So if they come back and it's just not the right fit, right? You've made the decision to decline the offer. Can you please give some examples of appropriate ways to do so?
Yeah, I'm always a big proponent here. Get on the phone. I always recommend like make it a phone call versus an email. I just think it's really easily misconstrued if you write it out in an email. Even if you word it beautifully, I think there's always going to be, just better inflection and tone when you can call an employer. I'd also encourage you to think about calling the recruiter, but also asking if you can call the hiring manager themselves. I think that's a really kind of good extra step that if you're declining the offer, at least thank them for their time, keep that connection open. Maybe they have your dream job opening in 2 months. You just don't know. So, and I think I kind of used the phrasing earlier. I think you just show gratitude for the process, getting to know the role and the company better. But I just respectfully have to decline. It's not the right role for me at this time, either monetarily or responsibility wise after further consideration. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if you have to decline someone's offer, let them know, right? Don't ghost them, don't ghost an employer. And if you're talking with an HR professional or a recruiter, letting them know the reason why it helps. It helps the organization understand the competitive advantage or the differentiator between, whoever you've accepted another offer with or the reason you've had to decline. And they can take that information and continuously improve. So, yeah.
Let's take a couple steps back, if you don't mind. So you just received an offer. Can we speak more to the best way to handle the negotiation conversation as you start it? And so kind of two parts. On the other side, maybe you're pretty happy with the offer and not needing to negotiate too much. Do you recommend always negotiating some? Or I think I've heard that advice somewhere.
Yeah, I have too. I've heard that advice to always negotiate. And, it most of the time makes sense, but it doesn't always make sense, right? So it's just, you kind of have to understand when it doesn't, when it doesn't. So let me see if I can put some words to when. So if when an offer comes in that is, representative of either the market value or the full market value, or even maybe above, um, it's okay to accept it. It's okay. I mean, there is, because here's the thing, right? Work is a transaction, right? If in exchange for your time, your employer pays you. So I'm not saying shortchange yourself, but I'm also saying, if an organization puts forth a fair offer, it's a fair offer. And so I guess maybe I'll back up and say, if I were, talking to friends and family, I would say, yeah, you should always try, figure out a way, to, squeeze out any more that you can. Because if you get a no, that's fine, right? But at least you've kind of flexed a muscle, and that muscle is advocating for yourself, negotiating. You're flexing a skill of negotiating. So I'd say do it, but then also understand the context, right? So like if a recruiter has jumped over, done a bunch of things to kind of get you to an offer, and that there have been concessions made, just take that into consideration if you're asking for yet more.
Yeah, I think, Boomy, that's the tough part. You want to sell everyone, of course, ask for more money, but I do think, we asked about pet peeves earlier. I will say, one of my pet peeves is if we've been on the same page about compensation, we've agreed on a number, or at least like a 5K-ish range, and then we hit that range and you come back and you ask for more. I think it's just frustrating for the whole team, because we thought we were on the same page and now we have to go back and ask for special approvals perhaps, and all of that jazz. So again, I encourage you to not be afraid, I guess, to bring up the money earlier on in the process. If you have a feeling, especially if you have a feeling that you're expecting maybe something different after hearing about the role and responsibilities. And I'd also echo too, that you have to know what the market value is for the role. If they've offered you something that according to all of your research is right around that range, then I would be selective. I also just like to throw out, there's a disclaimer, if you are going to negotiate, I would advise staying around like 10K or below, above what they're offering you. I have some folks who are like, well, I want to ask, they offered me 80 and I want to ask for 120. And I'm kind of like, oh, that's a tough sell, right? So just know, I would say within reason, like somewhere between an additional 0 to 10K. Even 10K is even probably pushing it a little bit, but be within reason when you ask. Again, ask with humility. I've certainly had candidates come back that lose out on the opportunity just because the way they asked was so aggressive, right? That it rubbed everyone the wrong way a little bit. So I would say ask. Again, I'd make it a phone call. I would never ask for that in writing, just because, again, I think you get misconstrued in writing about your tone and everything. Just approach it with a lot of humility, and yeah, again, align expectations as early as possible. That's like, if you don't remember anything else, I guess, from today, that would be my one thing, is try to be as transparent and upfront as possible in the earlier parts of the conversations.
And something you mentioned, Jamie, I wanted to also add, because we're making an assumption that, this is your first offer, or that you're accepting an offer at another job, right? But sometimes promotion or transition happens internally as well. So you're offered a promotion at your job. And so I know that it's not often thought of this way, but job changes are actually a really like the best way to earn more. Statistically, I think I'll have to fact check that statistic. A couple of years ago, it was true that, oftentimes a job change was really the best time to do your negotiating of an offer. So just think about that too, right? So like when you're at an organization and you're presented with an opportunity that's different than what you're currently doing, that's a promotional opportunity, that sometimes can be a way for you to do some negotiating if the organization allows it. Yeah.
Thank you. You kind of teed me up to my last couple of questions. I do want to make sure we allow time for those participating to ask their own questions. So I will just wrap up with this final question, and that is, if you're looking for upward mobility or a promotion within your current position versus switching companies, when and how do you ask and then negotiate for a salary raise?
I love this question because I think it's become less and less of a practice, I would say, for early in career generations right now to be communicative about what they want. I would tell you, if you start to feel like you're looking for an opportunity to grow or that you want to get to that next level, do not wait for a mid-year performance review. Do not wait for a final year performance review. I think you start that conversation as soon as you start to feel that way. Now, granted, I always like to give people a reminder, like I would say not to mention anything for about a year to a year and a half, at least in seat. I'd encourage you maybe a year and a half at minimum. But I think you bring it up with your direct manager. You have to have a clear vision of what you want. Don't just ask, I'd like to make more money, because we all would. I think you say, I'm really looking for an opportunity to grow and develop in X area. And then to take it a step further, I think it's your due diligence to come up with a few different ideas of how you could do that, right? So offering up, I want to take a few stretch assignments. I want to cover a maternity or paternity leave. I'd love for the chance to sit in on some of these higher level meetings to get more exposure. So I think it's bring it up as soon as you start to feel that way within reason, and then have some of your own ideas of how you're going to get there. And then when you get the internal offer, same advice, and I'm sorry, I probably sound like I'm beating a dead horse a little bit here, but as you're talking about what that next role looks like, be aligned on what compensation expectations look like for the role. I would say, find that out. You can usually find that out within your HR departments or from your manager, what the role looks like. And it's either a fit because of that or it's not. So you can kind of adjust from there as well. But those, I always tell people, don't just assume anyone knows that that's what you're looking for. You have to advocate for yourself above anyone else, and then you can get some assistance from there.
And I'd add on that you should understand what the compensable factors are at the organization that you're at. So some organizations, the only way to move up is to manage people. And so if you need to understand that and understand if management is something you're interested in, right? Some organizations honor the senior level contributions of individual contributors, which, so if you are a content expert and are interested in managing people, there may be opportunities to earn more, but you kind of have to know that about your organization's culture. And the only way to know that is to ask some questions, so as Jamie said, talk with your manager. So your career journey, you should own that, but you should also lean on your manager for that type of advice, assistance, and I'll be honest, some managers do a great job at this, but many of them do not. So, definitely tease that out based on where you are. Oftentimes a manager will have conversations weekly about the work only and not about your career. And if you're experiencing that, be conscious of it, and then know that it may be your manager's first time navigating through a career development conversation with someone who reports to them. So I think, you very much need to understand the organization you're at and kind of what how they compensate growth and learning opportunities. And then also, you may be able to earn more, right? But then think about earning in various ways too, right? So if they're able to promote you, great. But what if you're not ready for a promotion or not wanting that? If there are other assignments or things that you can do, other responsibilities you can have, that can be a good thing as well.
Thank you. All right, with that, we have just a few minutes left, so I am going to go ahead and open it up to any questions. Please feel free to use the chat, unmute yourselves, raise your hand.
I think I see one from Ray.
Hi, so Jamie, right? I wanted to know if you could say those resources again that you're talking about for budgeting.
Oh, yeah. Every Dollar is an app that I think is pretty popular. I mean, there's just Excel. You can do, old school Excel version. There's one more. I'm sure Dave Ramsey has a tool. Maybe, mint.com. Someone just put, yeah, boom, you just put in the chat. Every Dollar might be Dave Ramsey's tool now that I'm saying that out loud. Yeah, okay. But Excel, Every Dollar, those are the two big ones that I've used. Lena?
Okay, so my question is, if one applied for a position and then went through the interview process, was among the finalists, and then never got the opportunity to get the job, it was offered to someone else, and then 1 or 2 months down the line, the position is posted, should I reach out or wait for them to call me? So I have experienced that in the past. And then my second question is, as an immigrant, when do I let my potential employer know my immigration status when being offered? Do I wait in my first interview or until I receive an offer to tell them my immigration status? Thank you.
I can answer the answer to your second question comes to mind fresh on my mind. So I would recommend, so many organizations will advertise and state clearly kind of what their capacity is for understanding kind of where their ability to either sponsor someone or go through the visa process. So the work visa. So if an organization doesn't clearly state that up front, I would recommend when you're at the offer stage, because, and I can tell you why, as an organization, most times we've done our due diligence to understand what goes into offering and extending an offer to someone who requires either sponsorship or is a work visa. So, we understand what needs to happen on our end, and I would recommend doing that if you're going to be offered the role. So negotiating through that during the offer process. If it's not clearly stated in the job rec, usually folks will post and say whether or not they will sponsor. And if they don't, then I would say wait until you have an offer. I can't remember the part. You're welcome. I can't remember the first part of your question. I may need some help.
If the role you applied was posted, although you reached the second or final phase of the interview, but didn't get the offer and then it got reposted, do I go back to the employer?
I would. HR departments, it may seem like everyone is connected and talking to each other, but that is not always the case. Yeah, it is. There's a lot of people have to say yes to bring someone on in an organization. So I would circle back, especially if you were a finalist. I know we've got other questions, so I'll.
All right, thank you.
So I think we have time for Natalia. Do you want to go next, and then we'll do Tom's question? Oh, Natalia, I don't think we can hear you.
You might have to try without the headphones, I think, because you're not muted. I can see you're not muted. Do you want to go to Tom while we?
Do you want to we'll go to Tom and you can type it in the chat.
Yeah.
We can hear you there.
Go ahead.
Problem solved.
Sorry, thank you for help. I was playing with those headphones. Sorry. I have a question. Very quick. To Banmi. Sorry if I spelled your name. I think you are a very intelligent person. You was mentioned so many things. You are all very great. Thank you for presentation. Really beneficial for us. Like for entry-level positions, it's hard to find job. I experienced myself. Like a graduate students, we have some knowledge, we might have some experience there and there, but for us, it's hard to find like these entry-level positions, because especially in the governmental organizations where there is a culture to hire people with extensive experience in any of the roles. And I found myself hard like to find any positions, but within 1 year of graduating school soon, and I want to make sure that maybe you share some advice because like you mentioned, I also work like a student assistant. I really struggle financially because I have 3 children, and it's kind of getting very stretchy, and I really want more growth, career growth, and a little bit increase in pay and minimum wage. So it's really hard to find this growth within organization, especially governmental, like an opportunity not given for everyone, which is a big struggle for even graduate students. Like we have this big loans, student loans, but I don't feel like support from the organizations to hire new specialists. And if you can give any advice for how to receive at least a hope for an opportunity, maybe just culture is really kind of hard, like more conservative, like the preference to hire people with 15-20 years of experience.
Yep.
Even in those positions where really no degree required, and I found it really that's just government. I just criminal justice more. I try to find position with this governmental organization, and found it really, really hard. Like just because of this, kind of, I don't know the reason behind, but really people don't give an opportunity for new specialists, which is difficult to realize it.
Yeah. Yeah, Natalia, what you're describing is, thank you so much for sharing that, the difficulty, because you're right. It is challenging. It can be very challenging to penetrate certain markets, certain industries. And what I'll say is, in the same way your resume serves as a personal branding document, and is a touch point for an employer to understand you, it can't be the only touch point and opportunity for employers to understand you. So what I'm trying to say is your job search, if you look at it like a masterpiece, you've got your personal branding documents, you have your social media presence and social media, and maybe less much Instagram and Facebook, more so LinkedIn. But networking is so important, Natalia. It is honestly, it's a lost art, in my opinion. So much of a job search is wrapped up in, who you know, and not because meeting someone may be the way you get a job per se, right? But you are around folks around the industry, professional associations for the industry. You're learning, so you may not be extended a job opportunity, but you may get information about a fellowship that's designed for early career folks, or a co-op opportunity. So I would say, applying to roles online is a way to get jobs, but networking is another way. And making sure that you are enhancing your network is just as important, if not more important, than the personal branding documents that you have and your application at the organization.
Thank you so much. I think I heard it before from professionals, this advice. Thank you for reminding me. Thank you. Very appreciate it.
And just to add a quick little plug, our first session of the Career Readiness series was all about building your network. And if you use the link provided in the chat, you can access that video and go back and you can kind of see resources to identify and reach out to folks in your network that you might not have thought of. I know we're just about to run. Oh, it looks like, Jamie, did you see Tom's question?
Yeah, I can
Okay.
just, so Tom was just asking, should we exclude ourselves for job postings that say 2 to 3 years of experience? Should I still apply even though you might technically have 0 coming out of school? I am a big fan of don't self-disqualify, right? Apply, they'll disqualify you if it's not a fit. Within reason, I said, under 5 years of experience, I would say if they're asking for 5 to 10, like maybe just don't waste your own time and efforts on those. But I'd also give you the advice to tailor your resume to show experience through extracurriculars you participated in. Maybe you don't have like an internship in the space, but you were the treasurer on, the group that you're associated with university. So tailor your resume, and then also add in additional classes that you think really help kind of bulk up your experience. If you're applying for like an entry-level financial position, maybe you highlight in finance classes the projects you did and what you found interesting about it to try to draw more connection.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much, Jamie. So we are out of time tonight. I am so sorry because I know there are a lot of great questions out there. I am going to go ahead and drop in the chat Boomi and Jamie's contact information that they were gracious enough to provide. So if you have any questions we were not able to address, please feel free to reach out to them, and I'm sure they will be able to help you. Thank you all for your questions and participation this afternoon, and thank you to Jamie and Boomi for your willingness to share your valuable experience and insights. Whether you joined us before or just tuned in today, we hope that you found this program to be both helpful and impactful. Please keep your eyes on your email as you will be sent a follow-up email from us. You may also access the recordings at the link I provided a little further up in the chat. The Career Readiness series, which is what this program is a part of, is available to all alum. We invite you to view any of our previously recorded sessions and encourage you to use the Alumni Relations Office as a resource for your continued growth. As Grand Valley alumni, our commitment to you is as a Laker for a lifetime, which means we'll always be alongside you and all of our alumni ready to help you reach your next goals. No matter what stage of your life or career, you can turn to us for a lifetime of support. Please tap into your resources and your network, and don't forget to check out our website, gvsu.edu/alumni, for future events and resources. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks, Boomi.
Thanks. I couldn't find my unmute button. Good to see you again. Thanks, Ashlyn.
Yes,
Thank
thank you so much.
Bye.